The smell of gunpowder lingered in her nose, thick and suffocating. She blinked, but the darkness refused to fade. The last thing Serafina Zhao remembered was the betrayal, the knife slicing across her ribs, the blood soaking her hands as she staggered in her own base, her empire crumbling around her. So this is hell, she thought, bracing herself for eternal torment. But when her eyes opened again, she wasn't greeted by flames or shadows. Instead, white sheets cocooned her body, sunlight streamed through gauzy curtains, and a weak heartbeat thrummed inside her chest. The mirror on the wall showed a stranger's face. No, not a stranger. She knew this woman. Heaven Lu, a once famous actress who had vanished after a scandal that shook the entertainment world. The same actress plastered across tabloid headlines 2 years ago for throwing away her career over an unwanted child. Serafina, now Heaven, stared at the reflection. Soft skin, tired eyes, lips cracked from neglect. Gone was the commanding aura of the Demoness of the underground. In its place stood a woman who looked both fragile and exhausted, yet strangely alive. She touched her cheek. So, I'm Heaven Lu now? The bedroom door creaked open. A little boy padded inside, no older than 4, his tiny fists clutching a toy car. His eyes, dark, curious, cautious, lifted to meet hers. Mommy? His voice trembled, like he wasn't sure she'd answer. Serafina's chest tightened. She had slit countless throats without hesitation, but the sight of this child cracked something she thought long buried. Yes, she whispered, surprising herself. I'm here. The boy, Liang, stared at her for a moment longer before scampering to her side, climbing onto the bed, and curling against her arm. He didn't speak. He just held on, as though afraid she might vanish if he let go. For the first time in years, Serafina felt something other than rage or emptiness. Warmth. Vulnerability. A longing she had buried under corpses and contracts. But the illusion shattered when the door banged open again. A tall man stepped in, broad-shouldered, sharp-eyed, dressed in a crisp black suit. His presence sucked the air from the room. This must be Heaven Lu's husband. Adrian Chin. She recognized him instantly, wealthy businessman, the type of man who appeared on glossy magazine covers and financial reports. But his eyes weren't on her with warmth or even anger. No, his gaze was cold, calculated, as though she were a problem he'd already given up solving. You're awake, he said flatly. Serafina tilted her head, testing him. And you are? His jaw clenched. Don't play games, Heaven. We've had enough of that. He turned to leave, but not before tossing his final words over his shoulder. Don't expect me to pretend anymore. Whatever you're planning, keep it away from Liang. The boy flinched at his father's tone. Serafina's fists itched. How dare he speak like that with his son in the room? But she said nothing, for now. As the door shut, silence swallowed them again. Liang pressed closer to her, as if choosing her side without words. Serafina stroked his hair slowly. A vow formed inside her. She had clawed her way out of hell once, she could do it again. If Heaven Lu's life was broken, then she'd fix it, with blood, sweat, or fire if she had to. She'd protect this boy. She'd mend, or destroy, the cold man who called himself her husband. This wasn't the life she expected, but it was the life she was given. And she'd fight for it with the same ferocity that made the underworld fear her name. The mansion was beautiful, marble floors polished like mirrors, chandeliers dripping light from the ceiling, walls lined with expensive art. But to Serafina, it felt more like a gilded cage. After Adrian's cold exit, silence hung heavy. Leon dozed off against her side, his little breath steady, grounding her. She studied his face. Innocence. Trust. Everything she never had as a child. Her thoughts sharpened. He's the key. If I can give him stability, maybe I'll get the peaceful life I wanted. But reality didn't wait long to remind her of its claws. By afternoon, a woman in her 50s entered the room. She wore a maid uniform crisp enough to cut glass, her expression pinched with disapproval. Madam Lu, she said, voice clipped. Dr. Zhao says you're in stable condition. You may resume your daily routine, but the master has instructed you not to overexert yourself. Master? Serafina raised a brow. You mean Adrian Chin? The maid stiffened. Yes. And what if I decide otherwise? The woman's eyes narrowed, suspicion flickering. Then you'll do what you always do, make a scene. But for your son's sake, I suggest otherwise. Serafina smirked. This woman was bold, too bold. But her words rang like a warning. Heaven Lu's past behavior must have been erratic, selfish, destructive. If she wanted to rebuild this family, she'd have to erase that stain first. Later that evening, Serafina ventured downstairs. She found Adrian in his study, surrounded by paperwork, the lamplight casting his sharp profile into shadow. He didn't look up when she entered. I want to talk, she said simply. No, his voice was curt, final. She crossed her arms. You're my husband. We share a son. Don't you think conversation is necessary? At that, his pen froze. He finally lifted his gaze, eyes cold enough to freeze blood. Husband, he repeated, his tone laced with disdain. You threw that word away the moment you decided this marriage was nothing more than a leash to tie me down. Her lips twitched. So Heaven Lu is that kind of woman. People change, she said instead. You don't. Adrian's jaw hardened. I stayed for Liang, not for you. Don't mistake tolerance for forgiveness. Serafina felt heat creep into her chest, not shame, but irritation. In her old world, no one dared speak to her this way. Yet here she was, trapped in another woman's sins. She forced her voice steady. Fine. Then let's talk about Liang. He needs both parents. If you hate me, at least hide it from him. Something flickered across his face, guilt, maybe, but it vanished as quickly as it came. I won't argue with you in front of him. But don't think that means you and I have anything left. Her hands curled into fists. She wanted to slam his head into the desk, show him the Demoness hadn't vanished. But then Liang's small voice echoed in her head, Mommy? She unclenched slowly. I don't need your love, Adrian. Not now. But I'll earn my son's happiness, with or without you. She turned to leave, but his voice cut through the silence. And when you fail? She glanced back, meeting his eyes, her lips curving in a dangerous smile. Failure isn't in my vocabulary. Upstairs, in the solitude of her room, she lay awake long after the house fell silent. The cracks in this marriage ran deep, too deep to mend with words alone. But she wasn't Heaven Lu anymore. She was Serafina Zhao, Demoness of the underworld, and she'd claw her way into a new life, even if Adrian Chin despised her every step of the way. Her real enemies hadn't even appeared yet, but she could already feel them circling. And when they came, she'd be ready. The next morning, Serafina descended to the dining hall. The long oak table looked like it belonged in a palace, polished, cold, and far too wide for 3 people to feel like a family. Liang sat on one end, swinging his legs, his plate of eggs untouched. Adrian sat at the head, scrolling through his phone as though she weren't even in the room. Serafina slid into the chair beside her son, deliberately ignoring Adrian. She cut Liang's food into smaller pieces, nudging the fork toward him. Eat, she said gently. He hesitated, eyes flicking between his parents like he was gauging which way the storm would blow. Finally, he obeyed, nibbling at the food. Adrian's voice sliced through the silence. Don't act like you suddenly care. Serafina's eyes snapped up to him. And what does that mean? His gaze stayed glued to his phone. You vanish when it suits you. You scream when it suits you. And when you're done, you come crawling back expecting forgiveness. Don't play the mother card now, Heaven. The insult tasted bitter, but Serafina swallowed it. She wasn't going to let her temper ruin this. Whatever Heaven Lu did, I'm not repeating it. That made him look at her, really look. His eyes narrowed as if he sensed something was different. You talk like a stranger, he muttered. Serafina smirked faintly. If only you knew. The tension coiled thicker when the maid placed a cup of coffee beside her. She lifted it to her lips, eyes never leaving Adrian's. She saw his jaw tighten, the vein at his temple twitch. There was something between them, raw, jagged, and volatile. That night, the storm finally broke. Serafina had just put Leon to bed when she entered the master bedroom. Adrian was there already, loosening his tie, his shirt half undone. His broad shoulders and taut muscles flexed with every movement, the air thick with his cologne. He glanced at her, eyes dark. "Why are you still here? This is my room too." She crossed the floor slowly, deliberately, her silk nightgown brushing her legs. He scoffed. "You never treated it like one before." Her lips curved. "Maybe I've changed." His laugh was bitter, but when she passed him, his hand shot out, catching her wrist. She felt the heat of his grip, the restrained strength that could either break or hold her. "What game are you playing now?" he demanded, his face inches from hers. She leaned closer, her breath brushing his jawline. "What if I'm not playing at all?" His body went rigid. For the first time, his mask cracked, anger and desire clashing in his eyes. The air between them sizzled with something unspoken. His thumb brushed her pulse, feeling it race. For a heartbeat, Serafina almost let herself drown in the pull of it, the raw magnetism, the hunger she hadn't felt in years. But she forced herself to smirk, yanking her wrist free. "Relax, Adrian. I'm not desperate enough to beg for what you're too afraid to give." The words hit him like a slap. His hand clenched at his side, knuckles white. "You think this changes anything?" His voice was low, dangerous. "You're still the same selfish woman I can't stand." Serafina leaned against the doorframe, her silhouette lit by moonlight. "If you hated me half as much as you claim, you wouldn't look at me like that." And with that, she left him standing alone, fists tight, chest heaving, as though she'd ripped the ground out from under him. In the silence of the hall, she pressed her own hand to her chest. Her heart thundered, not from fear, but from something she refused to name. This marriage was broken, yes. But broken things had edges sharp enough to cut. And one way or another, someone in this house was going to bleed. The following days passed in a tug-of-war. Serafina played her role carefully, attentive mother, poised wife, though Adrian never softened. His silence was a blade, his stares heavy with resentment. But resentment wasn't the only thing in his eyes. One evening, after dinner, she caught him watching her across the room. He stood near the window, glass of whiskey in hand, the city lights painting his silhouette. His gaze swept over her, sharp, assessing, lingering too long on the curve of her neck where her robe had slipped open. Serafina raised her brows. "See something you like, husband?" His jaw tightened, but he didn't look away. "You've been different lately." She crossed the room, unhurried, until she was standing within arm's reach. The faint smell of smoke and oak clung to him, intoxicating. She leaned in, her voice low. "Maybe you're just seeing me clearly for the first time." His hand shot up suddenly, caging her against the wall. The glass of whiskey clattered onto the desk. His other palm braced beside her head, his body close enough that the heat of him seeped through her thin robe. "Don't test me," he warned, his breath brushing her lips. Her pulse leapt, but her smirk held steady. "Why not? Afraid of what you'll do?" His eyes darkened, a storm threatening to break. For a moment, Serafina thought he might actually kiss her, rough, punishing, the kind of kiss that left bruises. Instead, he forced himself back a step, muscles taut with restraint. "You don't get to play innocent," he said, voice thick. "You made this bed, lie in it." "Maybe I want to." She tilted her chin, daring him. The tension between them burned hotter than fire. She saw it in the way his throat bobbed when he swallowed, the way his hand twitched as if resisting the urge to touch her again. But then he scoffed, grabbing his jacket from the chair. "Careful, Heaven. If you think seduction will fix this marriage, you'll be disappointed." He left without another word. The door slammed, rattling the frame. Serafina exhaled slowly, her chest heaving. She pressed her fingers against her lips where his almost had been. Damn him. That night, she couldn't sleep. Her body still hummed from the nearness of him, from the heat that flared in her veins when his breath mingled with hers. She wasn't used to denial. In her old life, she took what she wanted without hesitation. Here, every move was checkmated by his stubborn pride. But she also wasn't used to wanting. When dawn came, she found herself in the kitchen, watching Leon munch on cereal, his messy hair sticking out in every direction. He grinned when he saw her, milk dribbling down his chin. "Mommy, can we go to the park today?" he asked. Serafina smoothed his hair. "Of course." Adrian's voice cut in from the doorway. "I'll drive you." She froze. He leaned against the frame, tie loosened, eyes unreadable. Leon cheered. "Daddy's coming too." The boy's joy was disarming, tugging at the corners of Adrian's mouth though he quickly smothered it. Their son saw only a family. Serafina saw something else, a battlefield. She met Adrian's gaze, fire against ice. "Fine," she said. "Let's go together." As he turned away, she noticed his hand clenched slightly, as though he was still fighting the ghost of last night, the almost that burned hotter than the touch itself. And she realized with a dangerous thrill, the cracks were widening. It was only a matter of time before restraint shattered. The park trip was supposed to be simple. Leon laughed as he ran across the grass, chasing pigeons, his small hands flapping like wings. His joy was contagious. Serafina found herself smiling in a way she hadn't in years. But Adrian ruined it with his silence. He walked beside her, tall and unyielding, his eyes always scanning the crowd as though danger lurked in every shadow. He didn't look like a man enjoying a family outing, he looked like a guard escorting someone he didn't trust. "You know," Serafina said finally, "most fathers play with their sons, not just glare at the sky." His gaze cut to her. "And most mothers don't vanish when their child needs them." Her smile died. She clenched her jaw. Every word out of his mouth was a blade meant to reopen wounds she hadn't even created. "Careful, Adrian," she said coldly. "You keep talking like that, and one day you'll regret it." His lips curved, humorless. "I've regretted this marriage since the beginning." The word should have stung, but instead, heat surged in her veins. Anger. Desire. The same maddening mix that had haunted her since he first pinned her against the wall. When they got home, Leon collapsed in bed, exhausted from the day. The house felt quiet, shadows stretching long across the hall. Serafina was halfway to her room when a hand grabbed her wrist. "Adrian." He spun her, shoving her against the wall, his body pressed close. His breath was ragged, his eyes blazing. "You drive me insane," he growled. She smirked, though her pulse pounded. "Good. I thought you were made of stone." His grip tightened, pinning her wrists above her head. The wall dug into her back, but she didn't flinch. She leaned into him, taunting. "What's the matter? Can't decide if you want to strangle me or..." His mouth crashed against hers. It wasn't gentle. It was punishing, desperate, a collision of fury and hunger. His teeth scraped her lip, his tongue forcing its way in, and she kissed back just as fiercely, biting, taking, refusing to surrender. Their bodies ground together, heat sparking where fabric still separated skin. His hand released her wrists only to trail down, grabbing her waist, pulling her flesh against him. She gasped against his mouth, nails clawing at his shirt, ripping buttons free. The kiss broke, both of them panting, their foreheads pressed together. His voice was hoarse, thick with conflict. "I hate you." Serafina's lips curved, swollen from his assault. "Then hate me harder." He groaned, slamming his mouth back onto hers, hands roaming, desperate and rough. She met him with equal ferocity, every touch a battlefield, every kiss a weapon. It wasn't love, it was war disguised as passion. And yet, it consumed them both. When he finally tore himself away, his chest heaving, his eyes were wild, as though he didn't recognize himself. He stepped back, fists clenched, as if distance alone could chain the madness. This never happened, he muttered, voice breaking. Serafina wiped her swollen lips with the back of her hand, smirking even as her body still trembled. Tell yourself that if it helps you sleep. He stormed out, slamming the door. Alone, Serafina touched her lips, still tasting him, still burning. For the first time since waking in this new life, she didn't know if she was winning or losing. But she did know one thing. Adrian Chin was no longer in control. And that terrified him more than anything. The house was quieter after that night. Too quiet. Adrian avoided her like she carried a plague. He left early for the office, came home late, sometimes not at all. When they crossed paths, his jaw tightened, his eyes flicked away, and silence thickened like smoke. But silence wasn't avoidance, it was denial. She saw the way his gaze lingered when he thought she wasn't looking, the twitch of his hand as though he wanted to touch her again but hated himself for it. Serafina let him stew. She had bigger problems. The first sign came 2 days later. She noticed the car parked across the street, windows tinted, engine idling too long. The same car was there again the next day, and the next. She caught the reflection of a camera lens glinting in the sun. They've found me. Her pulse sharpened. No one from Heaven Lu's world would tell her like that. This was her past. The underworld. The hell she thought she'd escaped. That night, she stood on the balcony, sipping wine, staring at the city lights. Adrian appeared behind her, loosening his tie, eyes shadowed with exhaustion. You're out here instead of in bed, he remarked. Maybe I was waiting for you. She turned, lips curling. His expression hardened, though his gaze dropped, just briefly, to her silk slip, the way the wind teased the hem. Don't start. She stepped closer, the glass stem twirling between her fingers. What if I wasn't starting? What if I wanted to finish what we began? His throat bobbed. His hands flexed at his sides. You think I'll fall for this again? I don't think, she whispered, brushing past him, her shoulder grazing his chest. I know. His hand shot out, gripping her arm. Heat flared where his skin met hers. His breath was ragged, just like that night, his eyes wild. He shoved her back against the railing, body caging hers. You make me lose control, he hissed. Then lose it, she taunted. For a heartbeat, he hovered on the edge, rage, hunger, restraint all colliding. His mouth descended halfway before he stopped, cursing under his breath as he shoved himself back. No. Not again. Serafina smirked, though inside, frustration clawed her. You'll break, Adrian. It's only a matter of time. He stormed inside, slamming the balcony door. She stood there alone, wine untouched, staring into the dark city streets where the car still waited. The past wasn't just watching, it was circling. The next day confirmed it. A letter arrived with no sender. Just a single black playing card tucked inside. The symbol etched on its surface was unmistakable. Her organization's calling card. Her old life had found her. At dinner, Adrian caught her staring at the card in her lap, her fork untouched. What is it? He asked, suspicious. She slid the card back into her pocket, masking her expression. Nothing. His eyes narrowed. You're hiding something. Wouldn't be the first time, she shot back, standing to leave. But as she walked away, she felt his gaze burn into her back. He knew something was wrong. Later that night, when she checked on Liang, she found him asleep clutching his toy car, his tiny chest rising and falling peacefully. She brushed a kiss against his forehead, her chest tightening with something fierce. Her enemies could circle all they wanted. They could drag her back to hell if they dared. But if they touched her son, she'd paint the streets red. Adrian wasn't a fool. For days, he'd watched her with growing suspicion. Heaven Lu had always been selfish, impulsive, shallow. But this woman, his wife, moved with a predator's poise, sharp eyes catching details others would miss, lips curling in amusement when they should tremble. And then there was the card he'd glimpsed. Black, with a symbol he didn't recognize, but the way she hid it screamed danger. He needed answers. Late one night, he pushed open the bedroom door. She was standing by the vanity, brushing her hair, silk robe slipping down her shoulder. The light gilded her skin in gold. She met his eyes in the mirror. "Something on your mind, husband?" "Yes." He closed the door behind him, the click echoing like a lock. "Who are you really?" Her hand stilled. She set the brush down slowly, turned, and faced him fully. "What do you mean? Don't play dumb." He stalked closer, voice low, dangerous. "You vanish for months, you come back a stranger, and suddenly you act like..." His eyes raked her, dark and accusing, "like someone I don't recognize." She tilted her head, lips curving. "Maybe you never bothered to recognize me in the first place." He slammed his hand against the wall beside her, pinning her in place. The proximity ignited that maddening heat between them, but his glare didn't waver. "Answer me." Her pulse thrummed. She could feel his body radiating heat, his breath brushing her cheek. She wanted to kiss him, to shut him up, to burn away this interrogation in fire and skin. But before she could move, a noise split the air. Glass shattering. Both their heads snapped toward the window. Serafina moved first. She shoved Adrian back, yanked open the drawer, and pulled a knife from beneath neatly folded clothes, a blade that had no business being in a starlet's room. Adrian's eyes widened. "What the?" "Stay with Liang," she snapped, already moving. She darted into the hall, senses razor-sharp. The air reeked of intruders, footsteps too heavy, shadows shifting where they shouldn't. 3 men in black masks emerged from the stairwell. They moved with military precision. Not paparazzi. Not burglars. Killers. Her killers. The first lunged. She slashed, blade slicing across his forearm, spinning to drive her elbow into his throat. He crumpled. The second swung a baton. She ducked, drove her knife into his side, twisted, and kicked him down the stairs. The third hesitated, startled by her ferocity. That heartbeat of doubt cost him his life, her knife buried in his chest before he could swing. Adrian appeared in the hall just in time to see the last man drop. His eyes widened, shock battling fury. "What the hell was that?" Serafina wiped blood off her blade, her voice calm. "What it looks like. You killed them. They were here for me," she snapped. "If I hadn't, you and Liang would be dead." Adrian's face darkened, his chest rising and falling. "You've brought danger into this house." Her laugh was low, bitter. "Danger was always going to find me. The only difference is whether I fight it or let it devour us." He stepped closer, grabbing her wrist, the knife still slick with blood between them. His voice was a growl. "Tell me the truth. Who are you?" Their faces were inches apart, tension crackling like fire. Her lips curved, defiant, even as his grip tightened. "The woman you married," she whispered, her eyes burning into his. "And the last woman who will ever let you fall asleep unguarded." The house reeked of blood and smoke. By morning, the intruders' bodies were gone, cleaned, hidden, erased as though they never existed. But Adrian hadn't slept. He'd spent the night pacing, his shirt still stained from dragging one of the corpses outside. When Serafina entered the study, he looked up, eyes burning. "Enough lies," he said. "I want the truth. Now." She leaned against the doorframe, arms folded. "The truth won't change what you already saw. It changes everything." He slammed his palm on the desk. "You, my wife, slaughtered 3 men like it was nothing. Who the hell are you, heaven?" She walked closer, stopping just short of his reach. Her voice was cold, deliberate. "I'm not heaven, Lou. Not the woman you married. She's gone. I am Serafina Zhao." He stared, as if trying to decide whether to laugh or throttle her. "And what the hell does that mean?" "It means I'm not just an actress. I led the deadliest assassin syndicate in the underground. Demoness, they called me." She met his gaze without flinching. And now my past wants me back in the ground. Silence stretched. Then Adrian moved, so fast she barely saw it, his hand gripping her chin, forcing her to meet his eyes. His voice was a growl, low and raw. Do you realize what kind of hell you've dragged into my son's life? Her pulse thundered, but she didn't look away. I'd rather drag hell into this house than let it steal him from me. Something in his face cracked, not forgiveness, not yet, but understanding. The fury in his eyes twisted into something darker, hotter. He shoved her back against the wall, his body caging hers, breath ragged. You're insane, he hissed. Then so are you, she shot back, grabbing his collar, yanking his mouth to hers. The kiss was fire and steel, brutal and consuming. His hand slammed against the wall beside her, then tangled in her hair, pulling, demanding. She bit his lip hard enough to draw blood, and he growled into her mouth, pressing closer, crushing the space between them. It wasn't tenderness. It was survival, rage, and want colliding into something they couldn't name. When they broke apart, gasping, his forehead pressed to hers, Adrian's voice was hoarse. This changes nothing. Serafina smirked, blood on her lip, fire in her eyes. It changes everything. Before he could answer, the sound of shattering glass tore through the house again. More intruders. Adrian spun, grabbing the poker from the fireplace. Serafina slid a knife from the sheath strapped to her thigh. Their eyes met, an unspoken pact forming in that instant. They fought back to back. Serafina moved like a phantom, blades flashing, every strike precise and lethal. Adrian wasn't her equal, but he was relentless, swinging the poker with brutal force, protecting her blind spots without hesitation. By the time the last body hit the floor, both were panting, drenched in sweat and blood. Serafina dropped her knife. Adrian leaned against the wall, chest heaving, staring at her. You're dangerous, he said finally. She wiped blood from her cheek, voice steady. So are you. You just hide it better. Silence stretched, heavy, broken only by the distant sound of Leon stirring upstairs. Adrian straightened, his jaw still tight, but something in his gaze had shifted. If you want this family, if you want me, then understand this. I won't live in the shadows you bring. You fight your hell, Serafina, but you fight it here. With me. With him. Her chest tightened, a feeling she refused to name clawing at her ribs. She stepped closer, close enough that their breaths mingled. Then don't stand in my way. He didn't answer. He just gripped her wrist, hard enough to bruise, and didn't let go. The Demoness of the underground and the cold businessman. Husband and wife. Enemies and lovers. Bound together not by trust, not yet, but by fire, by chains, by a war that was only just beginning.